Welcome to the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, episode number 255. A little progress every day adds to big results. Anonymous.
Broadcasting from the back alley in Hollywood, it's the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, where we show you how to survive and thrive as an indie filmmaker in the jungles of the film biz. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Welcome, my Indie Film Hustlers, to another episode of the Indie Film Hustle Podcast. I am your humble host, Alex Ferrari. Today's episode is brought to you by Blackbox. Blackbox is a new platform and community that is all about financial freedom for filmmakers like you. If you join Blackbox, you will be transformed from being a worker to being a maker of your own content. And you'll be making steady passive income from the global market. Blackbox currently allows you to upload your stock footage once, get it to many global agencies, and then allows you to share that passive income stream with your collaborators. Whether you want to submit old footage that's been sitting around in your hard drives or create brand new content, Blackbox is for you. It's really quite revolutionary. With Blackbox, filmmakers can concentrate on making great content while Blackbox takes care of all the business BS. Just visit www.blackbox.global to find out more. Today's show is also sponsored by Studio Unknown. Studio Unknown is a crack team of audio post professionals known for quality sound on any indie budget. Whether you need a lush surround sound mix or a quick festival submission pass, Studio Unknown can help you with all of your post sound needs, from sound design and mix to Foley, ADR, and even a custom score. Contact Studio Unknown and mention the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, and you'll get 50% off one day of ADR or 10% off your complete post sound package. Just go to studiounknown.com. Now, today on the show, I have a treat for you. We are going behind the curtain of Blackmagic Design. Anyone who's listened to this podcast knows how much I love Blackmagic Design's cameras, their editing systems, color grading, everything they have to offer, just the general company culture. I just love what they're doing. And no, I am not getting paid for this interview. I actually reached out to them because I wanted to bring on someone who can really show us an inside look at the company, at the corporate culture, and what makes the company tick, because the products that they're putting out is honestly revolutionizing filmmaking and revolutionizing tools for filmmakers to use to tell their stories. And I'm a big fan, and I wanted to get somebody on the show that could do that for us. And I was able to get the president of Blackmagic Design, Dan May, who I met at NAB this year, and he was the most unassuming guy. He was like one of the many guys with Blackmagic Design shirts walking around NAB. I had no idea who I was talking to when I talked to him for the first time. It was absolutely crazy. Then someone told me, hey, that was the president of, I'm like, what? He's just out here like mingling with the commoners? And I was really blown away. And I do call Blackmagic Design the biggest mom and pop company I've ever seen, dealt with, spoken to, because they're a monster company. They're a very big company, but they have a very mom and pop kind of mentality behind it. And the one thing that I really loved about talking to Dan is he said one really crucial thing. Unlike a lot of other companies in this space, they come up with a product. They come up with a price that they have to match, and then they create a product for it, as opposed to Blackmagic Design, who actually creates a product because it's going to be cool and it's going to help people and it's going to take things up to another notch, and then they figure out what they're going to charge for it. And they always keep it at a price point that is accessible to everybody. And sometimes they give stuff away for free, like Davinci Resolve. So without any further ado, I want you to enjoy this rare insider's look at Blackmagic Design with President Dan May. I'd like to welcome to the show Dan May. Dan, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're a very busy man.
No problem, Alex. I'm happy to be here.
I had a pleasure of meeting you at this year's NAB, and you were like the prom queen. Or king.
Yeah, well, look, I'll take it either way. We were busy. Busy's good. NABs for us are always exciting. We generally tend to have a number of new announcements out, and this year was no different. So it was great to be there, be talking to, folks that are using our products, people that are excited about what we're doing. And, we were really pleased with how the whole show went as a whole.
It was insane because I had never been to NAB before. And when I drove up to the convention center, all I saw was Blackmagic. Like,
yeah, it's a good place where we're at right now. We, obviously the company's grown massively over these last few years, and we've had a lot of our NABs have been great shows where we've had great product announcements, and some of the standouts were obviously the first time we came out with Davinci Resolve at $1,000, and when we came out with that first camera, it was like earth-shattering news was rippling through the hall. So we've had a number of just NABs that have been really outstanding for us as a company, and we really try to make the most of that opportunity to be there and engage with users face to face, but also it is really one of the few shows that globally is kind of seen. It's not just those people that show up in Las Vegas. There are plenty of media folks that are there. They're reporting from all over the world. So we definitely try to make the most of that opportunity and go big. Go big with announcements and with our presence, and try to help change our industry. That shows a big piece of our ability to do that.
And you guys are definitely doing that. So I wanted to first ask you, how did you get into the world of Blackmagic? Because obviously you weren't born into it out of the womb. So how did you get into Blackmagic?
I was created in a lab for So interesting for me. My background was in music. I have a degree in music, and I had been doing some work just as you do after university, trying to find your way in the world, and ended up landing at another video company and transitioned quite smoothly into video for a manufacturer, because while audio and video are different, certainly, hey, it's a timeline, things move, this is how things edit, and kind of started working for a manufacturer there, started doing just some side, here's how you work on video project type stuff. And just had worked for a couple other manufacturers for a few years. And eventually, when Blackmagic Design decided they want to start an office in the U.S., I kind of got that call to say, hey, we've sold some product into the U.S. I think Blackmagic was getting on to about 4 years old as a company. They had essentially no full-time employees in the U.S., and they said, look, we want to start this office in the U.S. What do you think? And I was like, well, yeah, that sounds like a great, a great opportunity to basically be employee number one. This is, at a time when we were selling Decklink cards, and that was pretty much it.
I remember those Decklink cards very fondly.
Yeah, they were great cards, great products. And, I kind of looked at the landscape and said, look, I think this is a great opportunity, kind of believed in the vision of what Grant Petty, the CEO, wanted to do. And came on board as basically employee number one in the U.S. So when you're president of Blackmagic Design Inc. in 2018, that sounds incredibly impressive. When you're president of Blackmagic Design in 2006, it's less impressive. You're employee number one in the U.S. and you kind of build from there. But it's
right. Not many people knew a lot about Blackmagic other than some Decklink cards.
Yeah, Decklink cards, what we wanted to do. So obviously it's been quite a transformation, and to obviously be a part of what Blackmagic's been able to do, play my role to help in the company and help Grant with his vision. It's been a fantastic run, and like you said, 2018, some 12 years later. If you had told me 12 years ago this is where we'd be, it sounds crazy. But of course, these are the stories that happen when companies do, figure out the kind of the magic, the black magic, what it is they want to do. And when people latch on to, what we're all about, and the fact that we continue to kind of push the envelope, that's all led to growth and success, and hopefully continued growth and success as we continue to, have NABs like when we had this last April.
So in 2006, you joined Blackmagic. How was the digital landscape then compared to now?
Well, the big thing then was, what Blackmagic had been able to kind of figure out was, things like Final Cut Pro, and what that application was able to do was able to really take a major crack at that kind of glass ceiling as far as the democratization of professional video production, right? Before, DV existed on kind of what was the consumer prosumer. I hate using those terms, but it was a way for people to have some capabilities that didn't really exist before. Obviously personal computers were getting
more
faster,
powerful, right?
More powerful to be able to do some amount of processing of video. DV was compressed enough to where you didn't necessarily require the crazy computing processing power, but and that's where Final Cut kind of had gotten its almost start as a look. We can be this other great DV editing software, but when you start bringing in uncompressed capture cards like Blackmagic Design had developed. You're talking about now being able to have this uncompressed video quality that was really limited to the Hollywood, I hate to say this, Hollywood elite, but really those, that had the big budgets to be able to do that professional quality and gain the benefits of working in uncompressed video. And suddenly Final Cut became a tool that folks in Hollywood could use immediately because, hey, look, I have the same uncompressed video capabilities at this much lower price point. Now, of course, what ended up happening there was every other independent filmmaker or student filmmaker or anybody else said, well, wait a minute, for a few $1,000, I now have the ability that took hundreds of thousands of dollars to do in that Hollywood post-production facility. So that was already on the table. That was what was changing the game. So when I, as someone outside of that piece, looked at it and said, look, that's really fascinating, and feel like I can help with some of that. Little did I know the entire roadmap and the opportunities that we were able to tackle as a company as the last, kind of decade plus has gone by to help us get to where we are now.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when Final Cut came out, and it basically allowed me to open up my post facility. Because before then, Avid basically was the dominant factor of editing, and it cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to have an editing system. So Final Cut did open that door and did
democratize.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's the word.
That is the word.
I use it a lot.
And you guys,
it's very black.
It is very Blackmagic-y. And you guys do that not only with software, but also with digital cameras and cinema cameras to be specific. When was the first time you guys decided to look into creating the first cinema cameras?
So we had like many people that are looking around the industry, and we had seen that there was a gap in kind of that camera space, and we had at that point we had already made the Davinci acquisitions. We had already had kind of Resolve cooking along. We had kind of diversified our breadth of products there. And we had made these hyperdecks kind of for this video recording purposes, where we were seeing that, the DSLRs had come and shaken up a bit of the landscape as well, where you had these amazing photo cameras that also did video, and they did video pretty well. It was compressed, but it looked good, and it suddenly put kind of professional video into a lot more people's hands. Again, the democratization of having this great looking video. Now, coming from the post-production side of things, we also realized the trouble with that highly compressed H.264 format that you're seeing out there, where it was just problematic. It wasn't super high quality. It didn't give you the real time performance. There are just some problems on there. And then from there, when you said, well, let's solve those post production problems. Well, from there, you're jumping up into $40,000+ cameras that are in that cine world, which are amazing cameras. They obviously function at the highest level. They give you that great post-production capability. They're very flexible, and they are largely unattainable by many people.
Most people, sure.
They're rental cameras for most people that can even get them at that level, but they're not cameras that are largely owned by people, and certainly aren't something you're going to go out and shoot on the weekend or do student films on. There's a big gap. There's a big gap there. So, we had said, like everyone else, well, look, someday one of these ends of the spectrum is going to, make a decision to move up or downstream, right? We're going to find DSLRs that suddenly have that workflow capability that's going to be very post-friendly, or we're going to find these high-end cinema camera manufacturers have figured out that this is how they're going to make that sub $10,000 kind of camera that gives you a sub functionality of their premium brand, I guess you could say. And we had heard whispers of that for years, right? We had heard people say that, oh, we're going to have, 4K for 4K or whatever. Lots of different rumors that were out there. Never seemed to come to pass. Year after year kind of went by. And I remember we were sitting there, and this must have been, sometime in 2010, if I want to say, and we we were talking about our next version of what the HyperDecks were going to be. And, these were little SSD recorders at the time that just had some button functionality. And we talked about adding a monitor and adding things like that. And, eventually what became what the Video Assist later became. And that kind of became but if we just put a sensor on it, it's basically a camera. And literally a few months later, sitting in Australia and having these engineers come out, and this must have been, November, December timeframe, having them walk out with this giant PCB with a lens on it and them going, well, this is a working camera and we could show this in April. And you go, there's no way we're going to show that in April. That's insane. Of course, this is what we do all the time. We dream up these ideas. We have these brilliant engineers, and lo and behold, a few months later, that's the first cinema camera 2.5K. And it was brilliant for what is basically our first camera. I still love the image that camera, makes. And while many, many things we've done in the years since then have helped build upon that camera.
And the camera you're speaking of is the cinema camera 2.5?
5K, yeah. And
it's wonderful. I shot my first feature on that. It's amazing.
It's even now you would call it an old camera by Blackmagic standards, 5 years old, whatever it is, 6 years old. That image is still amazing.
It's gorgeous.
That 13 stops of dynamic range. If you're really just doing 2K or HD, that is a beautiful image that creates. Now, we've added to our kind of subset of here's how you build a better menu system, and are these ergonomics maybe more what people want to see. But for a first camera, I tell you, that NAB, it was like aftershocks had just rippled through the industry. And I remember that was an amazing moment to be a part of Blackmagic and to say, wow, we've really changed things. Because even if that camera sold, 5,000 or 50,000 or 500,000 or whatever it was going to end up doing, we had realized that at that point we had entered a place that Blackmagic hadn't been before, that it was a very big stage that we were stepping onto. And that even if, regardless of how we did with that camera, which I would say we did well and have continued to do well with that camera, that was going to change the way that people looked at cameras in that space forever. No one was ever going to be able to say, well, I'm going to buy this other camera and not say, but how does it compare to what Blackmagic's doing over there?
Right.
And that's a really cool thing to be a part of when when you can actively say, this is a moment in time we are helping shift this industry, what we believe for the better for the users out there.
And how much was that camera? The price point was also another big thing.
It's $3,000, I want to say, at the time there. So it was but there's a lot of things that go into the thought of what we're doing, right? And when you look back at that camera, it was the idea of, we need to be able to convince someone that's using a DSLR already why they would want this camera. Look, it's using the same EF glass you probably already own. You're interested in doing better post-production work anyway. This is the camera that's going to give you that more post-production friendly workflow, having things like ProRes, having things like RAW capabilities that you don't have on your DSLR. If you're really serious about pursuing the cinema style of post-production. Heck, we're going to give you Davinci Resolve as part of that package because we want to pull you into the abilities that Resolve offers and kind of step up your game that way. And it was a great opportunity for us to help pull people over there. And then at the same point, I remember one of those first conversations at NAB talking to a cinematographer and them going, look, I'm still going to rent that other camera package for that week-long BMW shoot or whatever, commercial work I'm going to do. But this is the camera I can own for the other 3 weeks of the month where I'm shooting my independent films, where I'm working on my pet projects. This is the type of product that I would want to have there. So, we left that NAB feeling like we had ticked off a lot of the boxes. Now, of course, you get lots of other feedback like, well, you should have done this and you should have done this and you should have done that. That's great. We want that feedback. That's what's helped us these last 5 years continue to refine our camera development, shape the products that go every year. And, every year you've seen kind of new developments from Blackmagic, but that's another big shift. When we started coming out with more cameras, people were like, how could you make another camera 12 months, 18 months
oh God, I know.
later? You kind of go, well, look, Blackmagic tends to pursue a model that's more like, say, your cell phone or your graphics card. You don't necessarily buy a new graphics card every year just because there's a new graphics card. It's more powerful. Maybe there's new features. Same can be said for your phone. Now, if you want to, great. If you've got the capability or you've got the return on investment, we would say, look, we hope that $3,000 camera has served you well for the last 12 months or 18 months or 2 years. You don't have to buy the new Ursa Mini or the new Ursa Mini Pro or the new Pocket Cinema 4K, but you spent $1,200 or $2,000 or $5,000. At some point, you're going to decide you want to make that step, just like you would for your cell phone. I may not upgrade my cell phone every year. I may upgrade it every 3 or 4 years, but That's much different for a lot of folks that were coming from that market where you buy a DSLR and you use it for the next 5 years or 10 years because maybe they haven't come out with so many quick things. Or if you were going to buy a higher end cinema camera, it's an investment that clearly you're going to hold on to for 5 years, 10 years, and maybe you would sell it and you'd get some type of return on that. Well, that's not really the Blackmagic model. The Blackmagic model is going to be, we are going to price that thing as affordably as humanly possible so that we can get it out to the most people we can possibly get it to. And we're right back into the kitchen to work on something that's going to be 2 years down the road, hopefully be better. Maybe you need it, maybe you don't. But, we're going to continue to have this frantic push to get engineering done because, that's what's going to best serve our customers.
Well, one thing I love about working with Blackmagic products is that you are the only company currently that has the full ecosystem from camera to final deliverables and post-production and so on. You haven't done lenses yet, but I'm sure that's probably on the horizon.
Always discussed, definitely trepidation.
It's tough.
Goes along with that. That's a tough one to crack.
I've seen many companies come and go in the lens game. It's a really tough place to go into. But with Davinci Resolve, first of all, what made you guys go after a color grading system, which is basically the color grading system that cost $300,000 before, and then now buy it and then basically give it away?
So there's lots of look, like everything in life, a lot of things come down to opportunity, right? Mm-hmm. Recognizing what the opportunity is when something does come across your way. And for some of our products, you can look at, say, like live production switchers, and you can say that's something that was on Blackmagic's roadmap at that point in time when the opportunity to go out and buy Ecolab, a company that did switchers, came along. So you say, great, that makes sense. Let's get it. That's closer to market to do that than to continue the development that we're already working on. Davinci was probably a little different. Davinci was our first acquisition. Obviously, it was at a time when we were growing. We had made the decklings. We had moved into converters and some video hubs. And we were thinking about what our future and how to diversify was going to be. And along came this opportunity for us to acquire Davinci. And, as you say, Davinci was kind of like the Coke brand of our industry. It was such
color grading, absolutely.
When you walked into a post-production facility, if they had a color grading a suite, it usually was like the crown jewel of the facility. And, it was a lot of times in Hollywood was Davinci. And, was just kind of this amazing product that was out there that was a big standard of Hollywood, essentially. And I remember trying to explain to, like my mother and people that aren't part of our industry. And it was right at the time when Disney had bought Marvel. Right. And I said, imagine if Marvel bought Disney. It would seem weird. And I think in our industry, people were like, how did Blackmagic, this company that makes very nice widgets, and I say that lovingly because we were doing just fine selling widgets, these glue products, how are they buying this company Davinci, which is this 25-something-year-old company that's building these $500,000, $1 million systems? What are they doing? And that was a large leap of faith, I think, for us to go and say, like, look, this is what we could do if we do this. And, hear me out because it sounds crazy. We could continue to be a great partner to all these software partners that are out there, because obviously we were partnered up with, all the guys out there making software. But we also take a bit of control of our own destiny by doing this, because we can have a software platform that we can build around, that we can kind of have as a piece of a workflow that kind of fits into our vision of where we want to go as a company. And, what ends up happening there is you end up not necessarily being completely beholden to other partners that you may have. So again, we want to have the great partnerships with all the other software platforms out there. It's incredibly important for us to make those Decklinks and Ultra Studio products work with those companies, to make sure that our cameras have great workflows through all of their platforms. But we're also not completely beholden to, like, well, if they were to go away, or if they were to withdraw support from us as a company, we're not left out on an island. And so it was good for us. But we also said, look, this is going to continue with our mission of being able to provide these incredibly powerful platforms and solutions to as many people as possible. And, clearly when you look at what we've been able to do with that over the last 8 years, that feels like we've advanced that mission along considerably well. I'll give myself a little pat on the back for that one.
What you guys were able to do with Resolve, I was one of the, I think I was one of the first guys to jump on seriously as an editor on it a few years ago, because when you guys switched it over to, I think it was to 12 or to 12.5, when editing became a really, or 11 even, but I think 12 is when it really kind of took off. It was a really solid nonlinear editing system. When I edited my first feature on it, then I did huge shows and, Hulu shows and, other big projects on it. And then I started preaching about it. I'm like, guys, you don't understand. This is amazing. And I started like preaching from the top of the mountaintops of like, everybody, it's free, jump on it. And if please use this. And then it's just been getting better and better. It's fascinating what you were able to do with that software. And now, I swear to God, when I showed up to NAB, actually I got the email a day or two before I flew up to NAB that then you had now added not only color, not only sound, but you added fusion to.
And that goes back to building out that platform to be as the best platform it could be. And I think there's two important points that, we always try to kind of reiterate to folks is that, we want, like I said, we want to work with everybody out there, right? So if someone comes along and says, look, I'm using this other camera, we want to say, great, we've got Resolve. It's a great platform for you to use. If someone comes along and says, look, I'm married to this other software platform, that's what I use, we say, no problem. We've got these deck links or mini converters, or our camera has a great workflow. Part of the great Blackmagic plan has always been, don't force people to use what they don't want to use, right? Mm-hmm. Don't use proprietary media. Don't use proprietary lens choices. Don't say, great, once you've gotten into our solution, you have to use all of our solution, because that's not what anybody said. Nobody ever.
Nobody
boy,
ever.
I hope they force me to use everything that they make, because that's just disastrous. And we've seen it be disastrous in our field, and we've seen it be disastrous in other fields. So we want to be really upfront about look, if you love your product, other brand product, by all means, if we can make that work within our ecosystem, we want to make that be the case. And if you want to stay in a Blackmagic ecosystem, that is our goal. Look, you should be able to buy a camera from us, use Davinci Resolve, use our IO hardware, stay across that platform, use all that, as much Blackmagic product as you're comfortable using with. Hopefully we'll provide a lot of incentive to do that. Price will be one of those. Mm-hmm. Other workflow capabilities will be others. But look, don't feel like we're going to come and say well, you're not a true Blackmagic person because, you decided to use that other product. They are just tools, and we all recognize they are just tools. And look, we want to obviously do well as a business getting those tools out there, but we don't feel that forcing people to stick within an ecostructure is going to lead to that. So, that is a big piece of what we do. But, how great is it to be able to go to one software application and say, look, I've brought in my Blackmagic camera files, whether they're ProRes or RAW, and whether I'm one person and I've got this one tool to go, yeah, great, edit, color, VFX, mm-hmm. audio, mm-hmm. Basically don't have to worry about conform where everyone pulls all this out.
Yeah.
And be done with it. Or, I'm a post-production company that says, look, I can have multiple people working on the same product at the same time, same project on the same product at the same time. And I, again, don't have to do the conform where, again, everyone loses their hair and is up at 4 a.m. wondering what's going to go wrong next. These are great workflow benefits of being able to have that. So, we feel like not only did we just go out and say look, we're going to take this great platform and quote, give it away, we can actually do something that's not been done before.
Right.
And put this all into one tool, do it well. And hopefully, the fears are always look, don't add this in and suddenly make color be terrible, or, don't try to overdo one thing. So we've had to take it slow. Like I said, 11, 12, 12.5, every
well, but 14 to 15 was not that slow because I just updated to 14, and then all of a sudden I'm like, son of a god, now they just got 15 literally like within a month of when I updated it. And
15 is still in beta, so we're still working on it.
Exactly.
But it goes back to what I said, is like we are never going to stop or rest on our laurels and do that kind of like, cool, we're done now. Let's just collect checks the next 3 years and hope nobody else, kind of messes with the plan. Like it's always going to be about us going, okay, that was cool. When you go to a show like NAB, like I said, that's where you get all that great feedback. This is amazing. But you know what else you could do? Oh yeah, you're right. That would be cool. How cool would that be if we did that? Or, we still like, how many of our hardware products have we gone out and we're like, we're building all these racks, we're doing all this live production stuff. Like, why do we keep buying these other audio switcher or audio monitors that aren't made for video? A, they're expensive, and B, I can't select which audio tracks I want over the SDI. We could build that. Oh, let's just build it then. We are, Grant is the champion of like the nerds in the workshop that are just going like, this is cool and we can do it. Let's do it. Business model. Okay, let's figure out what that is. Okay, cool. That should work. But for us, it's about kind of, it always comes back to what's best for the users. If we think this is a good idea because we would want it, or we're going to use it, or we think it empowers more people, then that's pretty good. Like, let's start there instead of, how do we build a really expensive camera? Like, well, that's useless. Like, there are other folks out there that do a fine job with that. How do we sit down and say, how do we build the best $1,000 cinema camera, which was that first pocket camera? How do you do that? Like, what does it take? How much can you shove into a product like that and still make it be great at $1,000
and profitable?
That's a much different approach than we've built this product. How much can we charge for it? Which is a very typical kind of manufacturing approach to things. So it's just a very different way Blackmagic approaches building products, building solutions, and hopefully helping what we consider the most amount of users out there. What
I find fascinating, I've told this to people a lot since I've been, working with you guys over the years, is like, you are the biggest mom and pop operation I've ever seen. I mean, it's just like you have that mom and pop, beautiful, like small. I mean, like, I can have access. I can get access to someone like you. There is no big ivory towers. Everyone's just like this small little community, but it's not. It's a massive company. It's huge.
And look, to be honest, like, it's hard. Like, these are hard things to do, and there is a reason why you don't see this, out there often, because as a company grows, you get more people, you have more processes, you have more things, and the risk ends up being there that you kind of get diluted from your main goal. Right. Well, what is the main goal? Is the main goal to be stuffed full of bureaucrats to make things be easy? Is it about profitability and how much money can we're all going to drive fancy cars and have boats and or whatever that what is the actual goals? And the fact that Blackmagic's been able to maintain that goal of empowering the most users out there, that's the single focus and the the thing that drives us every day, and the rest of it becomes let's make sure that, we obviously want to grow, and we do have to have processes, and we do have to have profit. And those are the things, but that's not actually the first goal. The first goal is empowering people. And then down the list becomes, okay, let's make sure that this process makes sense and is efficient, because that efficiency is going to help us keep that cost down. But that is an incredibly difficult thing to do. And look, I'm glad that Blackmagic's grown the way it's grown. I'm glad it didn't grow necessarily overnight, because that obviously would be, like jumping into cold water, just shocking. We've been able to kind of have that organic growth that's allowed us to stay focused on what we're doing, to still have that kind of, like you said, sort of mom and pop feel, even though the company has gotten a lot bigger, because the core values of the company are still there. And that hunger to still succeed at whatever level of success you want to kind of put down there, whether it be growth or whether it be empowering people or whether it be, just building out a product line that we think is exciting. Those are the things that keep us going. And the other stuff, important, obviously, want to keep the lights on, want to keep people getting paychecks. That's great. That is an important part of it. But, all those other things have to be about, does that help empower more and more users out there.
Now, what are some of the films and television shows that use Blackmagic cameras? Because I think a lot of people don't realize that you are at the highest levels.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's hard with the camera stuff is that, I'm not going to start name dropping, but when you go into a major production company that does Hollywood type stuff, and I can think of a distinct example where we're sitting there and they're showing us these camera tests, and they're so thrilled with how the Blackmagic cameras are standing up to, the very expensive cameras that they use on all of their productions. Mm-hmm. And they said, look, we do this because, we have, being who they are, of course they can afford to use whatever camera they want to use. And they'll say, look, we're going to continue to use those cameras because we can on all of these highest level things. But you best well be sure we're taking Blackmagic cameras on every one of those shoots, because the last thing we want to do is put that camera in a situation that, it shouldn't be in, whether that be in a tight corner or in a car or in a danger zone, where we can use those Blackmagic cameras almost flippantly because they're almost disposable at that highest level. But at the same point, when we have, smaller projects, they can be A cameras. When we have other behind the scenes things, we can use them for all of that. So, that's how they generally get used on the highest level. And when I use a lot the Mad Max example of, of course they used, I think it was 2 Aries as their primary cameras, all of their headshots, all the things they were doing. We have a beautiful press story. You can find our website about this, but they use some 30 or 40 other Blackmagic cameras because the last thing they want to do is run all of those stunts over and over again. A lot of those are, we're doing this once. Let's put all these Blackmagic cameras out there because they cut so beautifully with them.
They do.
If a camera ends up getting blown up or run over, a Hollywood person is not that concerned about losing their $3,000 camera at the end of the day.
Right. That's craft services for 5 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. They're not worried about that. And at the end of the day, they have so much footage to then be able to pull. They can run that very expensive stunt once, and the cameras are just a very small piece of that. And that's a great example of, at the highest level, and why would they not want to use other beautiful, expensive cameras? They're all accustomed to it. They give them everything and more than they'd ever want. But they can use our cameras in ways that really give them new capabilities that they wouldn't have had before. Now, when you move back from that, you start talking about television work, when you talk about commercial work, when you talk about, anything, that's where you start seeing all these Blackmagic cameras starting to show up as A cameras in commercial work. And that's always exciting to be. But, what we're always excited is when it suddenly becomes in, when you walk, I remember, it must have been, 4 years ago now, going into a university, bringing whatever the latest new camera we had, and having the university professor talking to his group of film students and going like, well, how many people are familiar with Blackmagic cameras? And every film student puts their hand up and he says, does anybody have a Blackmagic camera? And literally half the students raised their hand because they had pocket cinema cameras and they had cinema 2.5 cameras. And even the professor was blown away because that's such a big change for that ownership of a professional camera. Right. These are the things that when we look and we say like, have cameras been successful? Yeah, look, I'd love to have the next Marvel movie be all shot with Blackmagic cameras. That'd be great. From just, again, calling up my mom and telling her that would be cool.
Right. But you know what? Because she's still not impressed with you.
But yeah, because she's still not impressed. We'll never be impressed. But, for me to be able to walk into that university or that film school and say, hey, how much Blackmagic stuff do you use? And they say, well, I own this camera and I've been learning on Resolve and I've been working on these other products. And you go like, well, that's amazing, because that's something that, again, 12 years ago, you said that's a goal. That's a real goal for us to have, because that's going to be what helps continue to, A, empower more people, goes back to that mission statement every time, and B, going to help the brand going forward, because, when those film students graduate, they're going to be very comfortable with, Blackmagic as a company, as a brand, and relate to what we're trying to do. And that's incredibly important to us.
It's what you've been able to do with, like, specifically Resolve, where you're giving it away. You're basically creating a generation of filmmakers who are going to be using your product just like Final Cut did back in the day when it first came out. Like, that's what, because when they were students or when they were coming up, when they moved into, full blown facilities or into bigger companies, they're like, hey, why don't we set up Davinci Resolve? I did that specifically when I I grew up, I was an Avid editor, then I jumped to Final Cut. And then when I moved into a studio job, I was head of the post-production department. And they're like, well, we want to there was one old Avid. I'm like, well, let's set up Final Cuts. And I set up in like 10 Final Cuts for the price of one Avid. And they were like, oh my God. And I know that's exactly what's going to happen and is happening today with Resolve. And then also the cameras and all the other things that you guys do. So it is quite genius what you guys are doing. We talk internally, say, look, short term, long term, what are our plans? What are our hopes? What are we trying to do when a few of us kind of think about where the ship is going? Grant's got both hands on the wheel and he's swerving left, he's swerving right. You have those conversations about, okay, what's the plan here? Where obviously goal is to empower people. How do you do that? Right. It sounds great. We're going to win. We're going to be successful. Well, how do you do that? And there's the long-term plan and the short-term plan. The short-term plan is, we're going to build X planet. We're going to have this launch. This is how we're going to package these things. This is how we're going to get it out there. This is how we're going to be efficient in all of the doing that. Long-term plans. How do you be a company in this industry that has had major, strangleholds on certain segments by certain brands? How do you become someone that's visible at that level as some of those folks that have been around 20, 30, 40 years as a brand? And how do you do that in a way that can be both disruptive, because obviously you can't just come in and be nice, but how do you do that without necessarily making everyone your enemy? And that long-term plan has to be about that. Look, we have to play nice with everybody. We have to be open. We have to obviously have a shtick. If the shtick is just be very affordable or give it away or whatever, these are important to being able to differentiate. And again, hopefully creating workflow advantages. Look, we don't just build a product because we want it to be inexpensive. That's nice. But it also has to do something. You also have to do something better than what's already out there. So, these are the type of conversations we have, and we say, look, should we build a Resolve affordable panel? And for a long time, we didn't think that was worth doing, because there are great panels out there that are very affordable by other manufacturers. And we said, look, we can focus on building other things, work on cameras, work on switchers, because those guys are doing a great job there. Now, a couple of years down the road, you kind of go and you say, those are great panels, but one of the things about those other panels is they're great because you can use them for any application out there. That's kind of the great part about them. The problem with that is they don't become a Resolve specific panel. So what we can do is we can create the best Resolve specific panel. And that's what led to those micro and mini panels to say, they're amazing.
They are amazing panels for Resolve. We're not pretending that they're great panels for anything else. Those other panels do a great job of that. But here's how we can do something that A, differentiates, B, empowers people, and C, really helps fill out a piece of the overall workflow. But that's kind of how some of those processes come around. Everyone comes to NAB and says, again, like the lenses is a great example. You should build lenses. Yeah, that sounds great. If we could build really affordable lenses, that'd be awesome. But what are we actually going to do that's not been done there other than being affordable? Like that may be enough on its own. And those are the conversations that we wrestle with and say, what next? What are the next C we're going to sail the SS Blackmagic into and wreak havoc and hopefully change our industry. It's hard, it's tough, and it's part of the big picture that we're always trying to look at.
So and speaking of disrupting and the SS Blackmagic and changing the industry, let's talk about the new Blackmagic Pocket Camera, because I saw it, I held it. We spoke a little bit on the floor about it. I just literally finished shooting my second feature on the original Pocket Camera. And it was wonderful because I love the look of that Super 16 sensor. It is such a unique look that there is nothing else on the marketplace like it. So, but of course, the one thing that everybody always said about the Pocket Camera was like, if it could just be 4K.
Yeah. I mean, so this is one of those, like, you'd get to NAB and people are like, what you guys should do?
Of course.
First of all, let me get out my notepad real quick because I want to jot this down.
Because you're the only one who's ever told me this.
The only one who's come and said that we should build a Pocket 4K camera. And look, I say that very lovingly and jokingly.
Of course.
We want that feedback from folks, and we would tell that very passionate individual that I always have to remind our team that, like, it's great because so many people want Blackmagic to succeed. How fortunate are we as a company that people come and they're like, I love what you're doing and I can't wait for you to make more stuff and I want you to be successful. And even people that say, I don't use your X product, they're like, I'm so happy with what you're doing because you're changing the industry. So we are so lucky to be in the position we're in where people are literally cheering for Blackmagic and wanting us to be successful because of how we are helping them and helping change the industry. Back to the Pocket 4K camera, we would tell that very impassioned person that came to us, we say, look, we get it. Like, we understand why we want it. But, we had made this production camera 4K that kind of feels like about the smallest we could build the 4K camera at that point in time. We're not so sure what else we could do or we could add to that. And of course, this is, 4 years ago, 3 years ago.
Sure.
And about 2 years ago, you start going, okay, look, we could actually do this. Like, we can get it to be 8-bit smaller. What are the other things that we could do that would improve upon this? And it takes time, right? It's not like as magical as Blackmagic is, it's not like we can just, turn anything out of anything. Like, it does actually take engineering and resources and developments and technology to be able to do it. So, when we finally kind of started going, like, look, we've worked on building smaller kind of electronics. You see some of these crazy little, micro converters and Ultra Studio minis, and we had worked on building smaller products and getting compact down and how do you deal with heat and dissipating heat? Obviously as Blackmagic grew, we were able to add more engineers and bring more talent on that's able to help with all that. So it's not just let's get back in the lab and one guy waves his wand and something comes out. Like, it does take time. It takes those developments to get done. So we started building what became the Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. And again, when you do have the ability to kind of sit back for 4 or 5 years, you're able to kind of say, okay, cool. Like, we've advanced some of our menu systems. We've advanced some of our, recording capabilities. Like I said, some of the heat things that were concerns when we had not been sure about how to make it smaller. And even still, we were having conversations as early as I think maybe the beginning of the year going. And this is the kind of things when, you're probably very fortunate to be in a situation. I'm like, should we call it the Pocket camera? It's a little good. When these are the biggest problems you're worried about,
right.
Having a discussion about like, look, like I said, we had started out with that original Pocket camera. How do you build the best $1,000 camera? And we're starting to look at this camera going like, look, this is maybe not going to be $1,000. Like, again, we want to keep the lights up and keep all those brilliant engineers paid to build more products.
Sure.
$995 is going to be a bit tough. And, what are we going to charge for it? We want to get as many of these out there. We don't want price to ever be the reason why someone can't buy a Blackmagic product. And should it be $12.95? Should it be $14.95? Is $19.95 too much? And eventually,
these are the conversations.
These are the kind of conversations you're having as you're getting it out the door, because the price was never really the first problem. The first problem was how are we going to build this amazing product, keep it as low as we want as far as cost can be. And eventually that's how we got to, we eventually said, Resolve had come down to $295 because that's how we roll. And we had said, well, if we're not going to do $995, let's settle on $12.95 and we'll give them Resolve for free, which we had not given on the Pocket camera. And that became a very kind of agreeable line for us to be able to stick to. So, it's
insane. It's $12.95. That's insane.
Yeah. And look, it's always that there is the internal wrestling that goes like, yeah, should we have charged $14.95 for it? That would be an extra $200 that would basically go to help pay for engineering. And you wonder, would we sell less if we did, or would we sell more at $12.95? And it's, these are the questions that we do wrestle with. But at the end of the day, it goes right back to that first mission statement, which is how are we going to help our users the most? And if we stick to that, we feel that we're more right than wrong most often. So that becomes a fallback kind of for us in a lot of ways.
What I find fascinating about the Pocket camera is I do believe out of all the cameras that you've created, and you've created the Ursa and the Ursa Minis and so on, that have been disruptors, this product specifically, when I first saw it and heard about it, I'm like, this has the biggest potential to be an absolute industry disruptor, because you're basically finally giving a DSLR style camera or size of camera, but with raw capability and ProRes capability, which does not exist
at
that price point. is insane, and giving them a free editing software, color grading software.
They're going to want that if they're going to be doing any type of overall workflow. And you're right. It is something that you look and you say, and that is why the price is so important, because you want to make that threshold to get this product as low as possible, right? You want to make it so that people look at it and they'll find faults because there's no perfect product out there, and they'll say, well, I wish it had this. I have my own wishes too. But at $12.95, are you willing to overlook that? Because where else are you getting this kind of price performance in a product? And then again, why these pricings are so important to us. Once they do that, and then hopefully they open up Resolve and they see some of the benefits of the workflow, and then they think about, maybe I should get a Deck Link or an Ultra Studio product to get video out of the computer into a monitor, or in if I have other things that I want to get inputs in. And that's how someone becomes, if they hadn't been familiar with the Blackmagic brand, that's how they become familiar, and they start looking at what we have to offer, and hopefully have that experience that says, look, there's a lot of great things here, and I am never going to claim that any one of these products do the same thing that the $40,000 or $80,000 equivalents do. But there's a reason those products cost that amount, and that's great. They should. That's what they cater to, and they sell 10 or whatever. I don't know what the numbers are, but that's the reason why that model exists. Our model is going to exist to go out there and empower the most amount of people possible, with the hope that they're going to turn around and say, well, I got this amazing camera, I got this free software. Let me buy some converters. Let me buy some Deck Link cards. Right. Let me look at these other products and build them in. And wow, now I've got this one company that really is helping me and giving me the choices that I don't seem to be able to find elsewhere. And hey, look, Alex, it seemed to have worked out pretty well the last 12 years.
You guys have been doing good. So basically, your products are like doorbusters on Black Friday.
But every product is. It's not like, and now we've got you. Now we've got you in the ecosystem. Let's hit you with the $10,000 a year support contract. Like, wait, what?
Where did
that come from?
That's exactly it. Every product is a doorbuster, and then so it's genius. And then how you guys are still alive and functioning as a company at these price points, it's amazing.
That goes back to the business end of things about efficiencies. Like, don't stuff yourself with a bunch of bureaucrats, and everyone has to be really doing, no one can hide at Blackmagic. You hear about these companies where it's like, well, I'm employee number 39,722. And what do you do? Well, I have coffee 6 hours a day. Great. Sure. No one can hide at Blackmagic because everyone has to be efficient. All of how we build things, how we develop, how we do everything has to be super efficient. Now, sometimes that comes around where people don't understand. Hollywood customer comes around and says, well, what's my price? And you say, well, it's $12.95. Right. It's the same price as the film student that's trying to scrape together the money to buy their first professional camera. Well, you know who I am? I don't know, man. When you get on Southwest, you just decide to pay more money so that you can, right? I mean, there have those things out there, but this is the world of democratization. And look, everyone pays EDU pricing. That's how we're rolling at Blackmagic.
I've heard stories off air, which I won't repeat names, but there have been very famous directors who are just like, don't you know who I am? And you're like, that's nice. That's great. It's $12.95, and then you just made $20 million on your last movie. Can you afford it?
Yeah, and the problem with the Hollywood, and this is what happens with. There's a reason why Davinci was in the situation where they were in. They were catering to Hollywood. They were building $500,000 systems, and those 10 customers, and I'm just using that number because it's simple. Those 10 customers would tell them what to do. They would struggle to get it done. They would sell 1 or 2 systems, and that was the business model. The problem is no one wants to spend $1 million anymore, or even $500,000 anymore. And what the terrifying thing for those customers when we did what we did to Davinci, when they said, you're going to screw everything up by giving it away for free or $1,000 or whatever they perceived it to be, it was look, you have to realize you guys are not funding the development that's needed for this application to be successful. And what's going to fund the development for those applications to be successful is all of these other users. So yes, we realize it's terrifying that we're putting professional color grading software into everybody's hands out there. But you know what? That major film is not going to go to Bucko's color grading company out in the middle of nowhere. They're coming to you because they trust you and you're a service and you have all of those abilities. And look, you guys want more capable colorists and people to come to you to workforce and help and have that workforce. That's never going to happen if there's just this elite product that no one can touch and use. But these are the things that, like I said, we have to sit down and say, look, we're going to empower users. Check that box. B,
sure.
How are we going to make this be as efficient as possible so that we can build a user base? We can't just ship 100 of these things. We got to ship 100,000 of these things to make that all work. And it has to be incredibly efficient. But that's how these last 12, before even I was here, 15 years for Blackmagic has been, building a business exists like that. And that's very hard to do if you're one of those companies that is also in that South Hall or other halls at NAB, and you go, well, how is this company going to be here in 10 or 15 years? Right. They've built a business around selling what they sell at a model that they have. How do you turn that tank down the windy road and say, no, we're going to do it all over again and give it away for free? Right. Like that kind of has to be built from the outset, or you have to have, massive revolution from within. And that's obviously terrifying, very hard. And that's why I say this is very hard to do. And look, someday when the Blackmagic book gets written, maybe people will appreciate it more for what it all is. But, for now, we're just happy to see the success of the products out there. Awesome. When you, again, see it used by a Hollywood user, or when you walk into that university and the students say, we are so glad that you guys are doing what you do. And, that's what makes us say, great, back to the lab. Let's get on with building more great products.
All right. So, Dan, thank you so much for being on the show. I have a few questions that I ask all my guests. It's going to be kind of a speed round if you have some time. All right.
Pleasure.
What advice would you give a filmmaker wanting to break into the business today, other than buying Blackmagic products?
One of the things that I realized actually doing this job, and that I tell filmmakers today, is, the only thing that separates you from that other successful person you idolize is the fact that they've done it and you haven't yet. There was a time where I thought, look, someday someone's going to realize I'm a fraud. I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't have any of the same skills that other successful person that I idolize is. And you realize once you kind of start breaking through that that's totally a load of crap. The only thing that actually separates you is the fact that they've gone and been able to do it, and you haven't done that yet. So obviously it takes hard work. Obviously it takes discipline to do, but that's it. It's not that they're brilliant. It's not that they've got some special formula. Sure, luck's involved. There's other things that are in there, but you actually have to go and do it. So don't be discouraged by the fact that I'll never be able to be a filmmaker or an audio person or a post-production engineer, whatever that dream is. The only thing that separates you from the person that's at that level is the fact they've done it. So just go do it.
Fantastic. Now, can you tell me what book had the biggest impact on your life or career?
Boy, book. I'm just audio, man. Like
audiobook then.
But yeah, no, look, I had read a lot about, I can't pull anyone up, but being I had come from music, I had read about a lot of, composers and musicians throughout history and so even as I transferred into video, like that last bit of advice, I just remember thinking about the troubles and the tribulations, and especially, when you think about musicians in particular, the struggles of not really having a lot of money, or obviously lots of folks went through drug and alcohol abuse and the struggles that went. One of the reasons why I decided I didn't really want to pursue that lifestyle, and that's still the same in video, but reading the biographies of so many people out there and the troubles, it makes you recognize that you're not, you're not unique snowflake. Everyone's got their struggles, everyone's got their challenges. It helps you kind of say, look, all you have to do is kind of keep going, keep reaching. And keep at it. And that's the plan to be able to get there. Because if you don't, you just won't get there.
What is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film industry, in your business, or in life?
Don't be afraid of admitting failure, because failure is a part of growth. And when you're young, you're so worried that if I do this and I do this wrong and I'm going to fail and everything is going to be over. And when you're very young, you really think that like life is over. And as you get older, you realize that is just all part of the process. So, hey, that didn't work out the way I want. What can I learn from that? How can I do it better the next time? And again, just get on to the next time.
And 3 of your favorite films of all time.
Oh boy.
That's a tough one.
Yeah. I mean, look, I cannot ever leave like an Empire Strikes Back off of the list of
course,
completely revolutionary, just change how you saw film. Godfather probably too is got to be up on that list too. But man, here's a weird one. I remember being a little kid and watching Ice Pirates.
That was such a great film.
And I think I was at that age where it was just like, being the sci-fi nerd that I was, like, I must have watched that film literally 3,000 times, because it was just, I don't know. My parents probably didn't even know that I was watching it that many times, but I just remember being a 5 or 7 year old kid and just a zillion. So yeah, totally not on the normal list of films.
A few films that remind me of.
Probably if I watched that now, I'd be like, "This is terrible."
Oh no, you can't. You can't. It has to live in your mind. You cannot go back.
Exist in my mind as just something that was very formative as what adventure meant.
To add to that list of those kind of movies, Ice Pirate movies, Time Bandits.
Time Bandits is right there. Yeah.
Krull, which is a horrible movie.
Yeah, terrible. But again, like, there's a lot of things that I think I can look back and go, like, wasn't Voltron an amazing cartoon? You go back and look at it and you're like, actually, it's got the same ice tropes that every one of those other things have. But look at the time, you go like, this is amazing. And that's part of what kind of, for me, built in that sense of adventure, that sense of creativity. And, even if it's not something that you carry with you day to day, that it is still part of who you feel is you.
Right.
So look, sometimes you can't deny it. You just got to embrace it and work with it.
And now, where can people find more about Blackmagic?
Yeah, the best place is to just go to our website, which is www.blackmagicdesign.com.
And there's a lot of stuff in that website.
A lot of stuff you can dig through in there if you've got the time, patience, and energy.
Dan, thank you. Man, you've been an absolute pleasure to talk to. You, an inspiration. And again, thank you for doing the good work that you're doing over at Blackmagic with all of those amazing people that work with you.
Not a problem, Alex. Happy to speak with you anytime.
I want to thank Dan May for taking the time out of his busy schedule to talk to the tribe and really just give us an insight to what they're doing and how they're doing it. And I don't know about you guys, I am super excited about the Blackmagic Pocket Camera 4K that's coming out in the fall. I already got pre-orders for it because I think it's going to change filmmaking in general. I think it's going to do what the DSLR did when it came out for filmmakers, because now you're going to be able to get a much cheaper DSLR as far as cost is concerned, but have much more capability and much more power than a lot of those DSLR cameras out there now by being able to shoot RAW, Apple ProRes RAW, Cinema DNG files, as well as slow-mo it just has so much stuff. And for $12.95 plus a free copy of Davinci Resolve, you can't beat it. So again, I'm always a champion of anybody that is able to give power to the people, who are able to put tools in creative people's hands that would not be able to afford them normally. That's why I'm such a big fan of the company and what they're doing and their whole mentality behind what they're doing. So, Dan, thank you again so much for being on the show. And if you want links to everything we talked about in this episode, head over to indiefilmhustle.com/255. And in those show notes, I have a link that you can download Davinci Resolve for free. I have a whole bunch of episodes and videos discussing why I edit strictly on Davinci Resolve now, and I do all my post-production through the Davinci Resolve package. It is insane. I edited 2 features on it, 3 television shows, and it's worked like a charm. And if you haven't already, please head over to filmmakingpodcast.com and leave me a good review on iTunes. It really helps out with the rankings and helps us get more and more filmmakers getting this information. So thanks again for listening, guys. And as always, keep that hustle going. Keep that dream alive. And I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Indie Film Hustle podcast at indiefilmhustle.com. That's INDIEFILMHUSTLE.com.